And I've met most of you. My name is Seeley. I have the huge privilege of being a member of Parliament. I'm probably not going to. I'm going to do as little of the talking as I possibly can, because A, the less I talk, the more popular I seem to be. But also that you're here to laugh, but it is also true. But it's also you're here to meet Donna and talk with Donna about policing matters, about stuff that is obviously policing related. Donna's our Police and Crime Commissioner. She covers Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. She is incredibly effective. Police commissioners are sometimes of mixed bag quality. Probably could say the same with members of Parliament. But as PCCs go, she's absolutely top drawer. She's incredibly active. She knows our patch well, and considering we're one relatively small bit of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, I'm delighted about how much she gets involved to support us. So I'm hugely grateful. Just from my point of view, some of either the highs or the lowlights, depending on how you want to phrase it. After the cutbacks about 13 years ago, we now have 30 more officers on the Isle of Wight alone, so 30 more police officers. And there are now about 650 additional officers in Hampshire as well, which is great. So there are more officers to do more of the sort of high volume stuff, which is sometimes a problem. As well as important stuff like domestic violence, sexual offences as well, and all these issues that have become more important, more visible in the last decade, last 15 years or so. We've also got a roads policing unit back on the island because I was very worried to know that we had some of the worst and most dangerous roads outside London in Britain. So we need a roads policing unit, and we've got the core of one back now. Roads policing and violent crime are still sharing, but to have a dedicated roads policing unit officers is a step in the right direction. And I know that we have some stuff that we were talking about earlier, some antisocial behaviour issues, whether that's in Sandown or whether that's in freshwater. The one I've been focused on has been freshwater, but we were down in Sandown today talking about some antisocial behaviour issues. So I'm going to hand over to Donna now, and then we'll take questions really for as long as folks want to ask Donna questions. But Donna, thank you very much indeed for being here, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. So what I thought I would do is probably just talk for maybe about 10 or 15 minutes to give you a bit of an overview of my role, and then to touch on some of the things that are going on the Isle of Wight from a policing perspective, some of the services that I commission over here, and then, as Bob said, really happy to take any comments or feedback or ideas that you have of things that you'd like to see from your local policing team. So, Police and Crime Commissioners have been around now for 12 years and came into force with a new piece of legislation called the Police Crime Social Responsibility Act. The number one responsibility in law of a Police and Crime Commissioner is to ensure that there is an effective police service in the police force area that they represent. So for me, as Bob has said, that covers all of Hampshire and all of the Isle of Wight, so some 2 million people and hundreds of thousands of businesses as well. Of the 2 million people, we have about 650,000 children as well included within that, and that brings about a whole load more complexities in terms of some of the child sexual exploitation and things that go on in communities that do mean that children are more vulnerable or more at risk from abuse and harm. So, I'm given a budget by the Home Office, which is called the Home Office Formula Grant, plus also the money that comes to me as income to pay for the police service from council tax, so from the policing element of your council tax. The combination of those two things comes to £432 million. Now, the vast majority of that, almost 90% of that money, as you would expect, goes on paying for police officer salaries and also police staff members. And there's a combined total of over 6,000 people who work for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Constabulary, and of those, just under 3,500 of those are police officers. So forensic specialists, for example, digital forensic people analysing telephones could be a police officer, but also could be a police staff member who is a specialist IT person, for example. So because I'm not a police officer, even though the money comes to me and the budget comes to me, and it's my job to set the strategic policing priorities, I have to employ a chief constable to run the police force for me. And actually, I employed a new chief constable who started on the 23rd of February of this year. Our previous chief constable had been with us for 6 or 7 years, and she retired, Olivia Pinckney. She retired in February, and as I say, new chief constable Scott Chilton started on the 23rd of Feb. Now, he had actually been a Hampshire police officer from the age of 18. He started at Cosham Police Station, just over the water. You can almost see the Isle of Wight from Cosham. And he worked his way up through the ranks to Assistant Chief Constable here in Hampshire. He covered our Joint Operations Unit, which has got firearms and dogs, and our Roads Policing Unit across the two counties. He was also a detective for a period of time, and also was an Assistant Chief Constable in charge of local policing, which I'll perhaps come back to what that covers if you want through questions and answers a little bit later. He left about 3 years ago to go and be the Deputy Chief Constable of Dorset Police, and then he became the Chief Constable of Dorset about 18 months ago, and has now come back to what is effectively his home force. But he still lives in Hampshire and always lived in Hampshire as well. So it's really good to have Scott back. And I knew Scott and worked with him when I was the leader of Portsmouth City Council as well. So I remember him from when he was a Chief Superintendent before he became a Chief Officer. So having a local police officer back, I really, February and recruiting a new Chief Constable was an opportunity for me. I've been Police and Crime Commissioner for about 18 months. I could see the force wasn't working in the way that I thought it should do. There are different ways that you can run police forces, and we had moved 7 or 8 years ago because of austerity. We had moved to a functional policing model, and that meant that the police force was run in silos around how the response patrol units operated, how the contact management centre was run, how detectives investigated crime, and it meant that it took policing away from communities, and there wasn't a real local community function. So what's happened is, when I recruited the new Chief Constable, I gave him 4 red lines. One of them was absolutely to drive up performance, to make sure that when people are reporting a crime, it is being responded to make sure that they're getting feedback, to make sure that the force is no longer a high harm only force, which means that the police were only going during COVID to, for example, rapes, murders, knife attacks, and serious fights and acts of domestic abuse and domestic violence, and obviously sexual and child sexual abuse as well. But actually what I've now said to the Chief Constable is, you've got 600 more police, the government have given us more money to recruit more police officers, you now need to make sure that you are responding to medium level crime and to low level crime. So it could be somebody's wing mirror being kicked off. It's no longer acceptable to file that, give somebody a crime reference number and simply say, claim on your insurance. What about if there's been 12 wing mirrors that have been kicked off? What about if there have been 20 cars that people have tried to break into over the period of that night, the night before, over a week period in that postcode area? So the absolute key thing is that the police, if there is an evidence line of inquiry that they can pursue, I've said to the new chief, that is what the public expect, and therefore that is what I expect. And he has now brought out 3 new areas of focus for the police force, and the number 1 of those is the relentless pursuit of criminals. So number 1, that was drive up performance and start dealing with lower level medium crimes as well as the high harm crimes. Number 2 was change the operating model of the force. So anyone here who's worked with the police over the years, or perhaps is retired from a public service that's worked within policing, will know that years ago police forces ran on what was called a geographical policing model. So, for example, your district commander, your most senior police officer here on the Isle of Wight, would have control of neighbourhood policing teams, coming back to local policing, have control of response and patrol, have control of detectives, have control of response vehicles, have control of the forensic and the CSIs, have control of their own dog unit. What has happened up until now is that your district commander here on the Isle of Wight only really had direct control of how to direct and task police officers of the neighbourhood policing teams only, and not, so that includes PCSOs and PCs, but not of response and patrol. Response and patrol was directed by the control room in Netley in Southampton, and detectives reported to a chief superintendent and an assistant chief constable over on the mainland. And so that meant that your district commander here wasn't really empowered to have all the tools in the box that he needed to be able to direct and to be able to surge towards a spate of burglaries in, for example, in Freshwater, wherever it might be. So, as of the 12th of June, Monday of last week, the Chief Constable brought in the brand new operating model. So this police force has now gone back to a geographical policing model, and that is, as I say, very much one of the things that I tasked him to do. Now, as Police and Crime Commissioner, I mentioned I have to set the strategic policing priorities for the force. And when I do that, every police commissioner has to write a police and crime plan, and the document has to be registered with the Home Office within 10 months of every police and crime commissioner being elected. Police and crime commissioners are normally elected for a 4-year period, but because of COVID, all police commissioners have got a 3-year term, meaning we're up for election again next year. So for me, that is May next year. So this is my police and crime plan. It's called More Police, Safer Streets because that's what I pledged to do for you. As part of the National Police Uplift Programme, we were tasked in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, we were given the funding from the Home Office to recruit 498 extra police officers. But I wasn't happy with that. I thought we needed to have more, and so I pledged 600 new police officers. Now, when I made that pledge, it was before I was elected, it was when I was a lay person on the outside looking in. But having been the leader of a unitary city authority, having worked as a magistrate for a number of years, and having worked in banking as well, I understand money, I understand finance, and I knew that I would be able to find efficiencies within the force to find the money to pay for the extra 102 police officers. And that is exactly what I've done. The 600 police officer was recruited at the end of February this year, and what I've been able to do, thanks to the council tax increase, is pledge another 50 police officers starting from the 1st of April this year. So that is net on top of those that leave and retire, which we will recruit and backfill anyway. This means we will have a net increase of 50 police officers by this time next year, or in fact before then. Because more police means more detection and more prevention, and that's ultimately what this is about. So, back to this document. You can look it up online if you want to. I've brought some copies with me if people want to take one home. You can look it up, morepolicesaferstreets.com. In the document, I have set the key priorities that you all told me you wanted to see. So 8,000 people responded to both my paper-based and online survey. So the number one priority, more police, that's what you want. Number two is about driving up the visibility of the police. What you said to me is, it's all very well and good having more police, but we actually want to see them. We don't just want to have them, we want to see them walking the streets, cycling, going to community meetings, engaging with us. You also told me you wanted me to tackle antisocial behaviour, and perhaps I can go into that through questions if you want me to talk more about ASB. You told me that you wanted me to tackle knife crime, unauthorised encampments, and a whole load of other things. So these are the top 9 priorities. So every page when you go through it will say what the priority is, why I think we need it because of the evidence and the information I've gathered from you, the public, how I'm going to do it, and how you can judge me if I've been successful in doing it. So the first 9 sort of pages are all about what I'm going to do to help you to make things better. Then we get into the criminal justice system and the part that I play as Police and Crime Commissioner in tackling and improving the criminal justice system. So as the Commissioner, I have to chair the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Criminal Justice Board. Judges sit on that, magistrates sit on that. I have the regional director of the Crown Prosecution Service, of the Probation Service, and a whole load of key partners in the criminal justice world. And my job is to make sure that they're hitting standards around things like the Victims Code. It's about making sure that the court recovery and around the times it's taking for both Crown Court and magistrate trials to be heard, that they are not getting too far behind. If they are, I have to raise that with the Ministry of Justice, and I have meetings with them every month as well. There are a whole load of other things that happen in the criminal justice world, but that is certainly one of the things that I have to do. Then there's a section around money, so how I spend money, the grants I give out, and I have allocated £3 million of the budget of that 432 million quid that we have here in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. I've allocated £3 million of that to go towards paying for victim services and also programmes to prevent perpetrators of crime from reoffending. So from my perspective, one of the things when I became Commissioner, 85–90% of the budgets that the money that we were spending through the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner was going on victim services only, and very, very small amount was going on preventing criminals from reoffending. I've turned that around. I'd rather we spend more money on preventing crime from happening than holding someone's hand and helping them when they have been a victim of crime. The best way to help a victim is to stop them from being a victim in the first place, whether that be around domestic abuse, whether it be alcohol and drug related. So I work very closely with councils, with public health directors, very closely with health actually, in a lot of the commissioning that I pay. So I'm paying for charities to do drug testing on arrest, for all of our custody suites across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, youth diversion programmes, and a whole lot of other things. So, if you do want a copy, please grab one. There are some at the back, and I've got some with me as well. As well as being the Commissioner here in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, I also have 2 national portfolios. One is National Lead for Victims, which includes violence against women and girls, and the second one is National Police Commissioner Lead for Serious and Organised Crime. So that means that I meet regularly with the National Crime Agency. I've been working with the Policing Minister, who has serious and organised crime within his policing portfolio through the Home Office, to make sure that the national strategy around serious and organised crime is where it needs to be. I sit on the national executive of the regional organised crime units as well, and there's a whole lot of complexity. And if anyone is interested in talking about serious and organised crime this evening, I am very happy to go into that and answer questions for you as well. As of the 12th of July, so in a couple of weeks' time, I'm going to be stepping down from my two portfolios and taking on the national chair of the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, which means that it gives me an even bigger voice to represent Hampshire and the Isle of Wight on the national stage and to be influencing and shaping policy and legislation that's being in draft form now through the Ministry of Justice, through the Home Office, and occasionally with other government departments, like, for example, the Department for Communities and Local Government, who overlap into dealing with antisocial behaviour and some of those crimes that will be affecting you the most in your communities. So, I've lived in Hampshire all my life. I have two children who are growing up here in this county as well. Well, they are growing up now, they're 18 and 20. But I want this community to be as safe as you want it to be. That is my absolute pledge to you. That is what I want to do. And coming out and coming to public meetings like this and working alongside councillors, mayors, parish councillors, community champions, and of course members of Parliament like Bob are absolutely key. And I'm really pleased to have been able to bring back the Roads Policing Unit on the island. That's going to grow, we'll have more people going into it, and a big thanks to Bob for the work that he did in really pushing that point and lobbying me when I first became Commissioner. So on that point I'm going to stop, because I think I probably have 15 minutes, and hand over for questions.
Donna, thank you so much indeed. Should we do this as follows? Folks, if you've got any very specific issues about anything that you want to raise about yourselves, I'm sort of we're very happy to talk about that, but it'd be nice perhaps to do it at the end, and people have more general points about policing or specific types of crime that they're looking at, or anything that concerns them about crime in general, rather than any specific case that you have. So can I just ask if anyone's got any questions or comments or anything that you'd like to say at the moment? This lady here. Would it be possible if you could just introduce yourself as well?
Hi, my name's Jane Davidson and I live in Northwood. I've recently, before Christmas, I had calls to ring the 101 number, and I was really disappointed. I hung on for over half an hour and was never answered. Recently I was up in Shetland. I had calls to ring the 101 number up there and had a completely different experience. And I thought, well, how on earth can it be so bad that I never even got answered? And so I think as part of your remit, you really need to be looking at how members of the public who don't have very serious issues, but still have issues that need a police response, actually access.
Can't get through, yes.
Yeah.
Completely agree with you. So, one of them is improving the 101 service, and you're absolutely right. So before I was in this post, in January 2020, the force decided, in their wisdom, wasn't a decision taken by me, it was 18 months before I arrived, they knew that their contact management, that's what it's called, contact management system, needed to be updated. And there's a system called Storm, which 70% of police forces use. It's not perfect. There are lots of other systems like the Police National Database and other things that need to interface. They don't interface perfectly with Storm. So Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Constabulary decided before, 3 odd years ago, to build their own system from scratch. That they thought that they could solutionise what others couldn't. They would be able to make this all singing or dancing system, which 40 other applications could interface into, and then they would be able to sell that to the policing market across the UK, make the money back on what they'd spent on developing it. It hasn't worked. And so it's glitching all the time. It goes offline for an hour at a time, and they're having to go back to paper-based systems, which is how we worked 35 years ago. it's a travesty. On top of that, we're also really struggling with the recruitment market in Southampton. So the 101 and the 999 calls come in predominantly to the big police station in the middle of Southampton, the Police Investigation Centre, the PIC in Portsmouth, in Southampton. And then your deployer, so if you phone and I say, hello Hampshire, Constabulary, how can I help you? Hello, someone just bashed my car and driven off, yeah? So a hit and run. Okay, so can you give me the details, where are you? So when I'm talking to you, I'm in Southampton in the police station. Someone else is listening to my call in the control room in Netley, which is the police headquarters, and they are then speaking to the police officers to say, right, yeah, car on this road, really busy, car's really damaged, it's on a dual carriageway, it's dangerous, raise police and unit, need to get there ASAP. So someone else is telling the police what's going on and where to go. They're then monitoring on a map where the police are, where you are. I'm still talking to you. Hang on, I know it's dangerous, I know it's rush hour, it's busy. Okay, we're going to get someone there. So that whole employment market in Southampton, because of the number of insurance companies and with Bournemouth and life insurance companies, etc., it is a competitive market. We had 85 vacancies out of about 300 positions in the across the two areas, the two different sites. To address this problem, because I've given them a year, given them extra budget, bring on recruitment consultants, do what you need to do. We've upped the salary by £4,000 a year to £31,000, plus a couple of other bits and pieces. It's come down to 50 vacancies, but a lot of the people that worked in contact management wanted to become police officers. So because we've had this really robust police recruitment programme, contact management has been a stepping stone into becoming a police officer, because of course they're natural bedfellows. So that hasn't helped. Now the recruitment is slowing down from 600 to 50 for the year ahead. That will help. However, we're about to split the contact management so that when you phone, it could be somebody in Portsmouth that answers the call as well. The Portsmouth employment market is not as stretched as the Southampton employment market. It's not as competitive in terms of call centres. So we are now thinking outside of the box, and the Chief Constable and I had this very literally yesterday and this week talking about perhaps changing the entire IT system. It isn't good enough. Our average call waiting times last year were 8.5 minutes. You obviously, I'm so sorry that you had that terrible experience of over half an hour. That is not uncommon. I have heard that a lot.
I've had that.
Which is why I have put it in here, which is why the 101, I'll find it on my page, is all about making it easier for you to get through on the 101. That is the name of the pledge. So there's been an awful lot of work that's going on behind the scenes.
Can I just ask that?
Yes, of course.
Is it actually your responsibility? I mean, it's great that you're taking responsibility for stuff that isn't your responsibility, but is this a national issue, or is it actually, are you responsible for the Hampshire one? And secondly, we've got the advanced call centre down in Cowes. I mean, is there any chance of getting some of these jobs down here?
Yes,
exactly.
Yes.
You've got the hub at St Mary's,
yeah.
and they know rather by the back of their hand. Why couldn't you interface with them?
Yes.
The local.
We're looking to do it across the whole of the two counties, but at the moment Portsmouth is the first one we've just signed off, but absolutely the Isle of Wight is one of the ones that's in play at the moment to look at that. Yes, it is, Bob, you're right, there is a surge across the whole country, so the demand on the 101 service has gone up by 40% here, and that is the same across the country. The population is growing, crime is growing, and crime is becoming more complex. So actually more people are now phoning 101. On top of that, when things go wrong, let's talk about mental health crisis. When there is an issue, often people phone 999 and ask for the police, not an ambulance, even though actually our ambulance services have specially trained people to deal with mental health crisis. So often police officers will be turning up to health jobs, even though it's not really, they're not trained mental health workers, so they are not necessarily the right people to attend. So there is a
999 call handler be working that out. Surely that's what I would expect a call handler to be getting the information, and if it was clearly a health matter, you'd refer that over to your health.
Yeah.
You would, but what happens is when you originally dial 999, you actually go through to BT. You probably saw it on the news at the weekend that the national BT 999 treble line service went down, their systems crashed for every police force in the country, or not in the country, sorry, in England and Wales, not in Scotland and Northern Ireland, slightly different system for them. Anyway, so that happened from 8:30 to 9:30 on Sunday morning. Now, so BT, hello, which service? Police. Then you land, where geographically, according to the GPS on your phone, you land where you are. And so for us, yes, the call handler would say what's going on, right, we're going to send a unit to you now anyway, but I'm also going to be connecting to my ambulance colleagues, through the 999 to make sure that I can get them there too. So the call handler can do that by talking. The problem is that if somebody says, I'm about to jump in front of a train, I'm standing on a bridge, I'm on a motorway, and the police don't deploy, and say, right, we're patching you through to ambulance, you need to speak to them instead, and then somebody did jump and kill someone else or kill themselves or whatever, there would be an automatic referral to the Independent Office of Police Complaints, the regulatory body. So police are duty bound to attend if there is an emergency of that nature. The Home Secretary has addressed this, she's dealing with it, she's spoken to the Health Secretary, but until the regulations change, police regulations change, unfortunately the police need to go. Also, ambulances take longer to turn up in a lot of cases than the police do, which is why police are often there just to keep the person safe, even though they're not qualified as mental health workers. So it's a very, very complex issue. In terms of Bob's point around, is this my responsibility or is it a national issue? Well, actually the demand on the 101 has gone up across the country. It is my job to ensure there is an effective police service, and if getting through on the 101 means that you don't have an effective police service, whilst it's my chief constable I hold him to account to say, the call centre's not working, what are you going to do about it? Ultimately, I hold the budget, so it's for me to say, right, I'm going to give you some more money to go towards recruitment, to pay more on salaries, and so actually it's very much a joint thing, actually. That, gentleman.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, next question, please. Right, is this the question about policing?
Oh yes, about the warm-up report and the use of the term antisocial, because at the end of the day you mentioned antisocial.
Okay.
But if the original, if your definition is applied in 1978, what is being done to ensure that the two definitions don't get confused? I wrote to the council about this. The Community Safety Department should turn around and said that as far as they're concerned, the definition shouldn't be confused. So if there's an original definition in 1978, if 20 years later you introduce a new definition, what is being done to ensure that the two definitions don't get confused?
Okay. Do you know the answer to that?
Of what, sorry, antisocial behaviour?
The original definition of antisocial behaviour was defined in the Baroness Warnock's report, the Warnock report in 1978.
Yes.
And it largely related to special education and needs children.
Okay.
Okay, so what is being done to prevent, like we put to the council, what is being done to prevent the two definitions being confused? In schools, in the street, in everywhere.
Yeah.
You get the term antisocial being applied,
yes.
and 99% of you aren't aware that there's an original definition defined in 1978.
Okay.
So what's been done, right to the council, they clearly said the definitions should not be confused with one another. So what's being done to prevent that?
This is around children with special educational needs.
It's around any use of the term antisocial, because if you've got an original definition that applies to certain circumstances,
Yeah.
then you've introduced a new definition under crime and disorder.
Yes.
Disorderly means what? Disorder means what? It's got a definition. But the
Yes.
point being, if it's got an original definition, you shouldn't then confuse it. A constable doesn't understand the original definition, and yet by definition, you should actually have awareness of what the original definition is.
Yes.
It's the same as for the schools.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. Right, so basically two pieces of existing legislation that are kind of basically rubbing against each other.
Consider it a double-edged sword, in the lacuna. The gap in the middle, is the gap in the law. The problem is, there isn't awareness between the gap in the law. You've got an original definition that determines what it is, and you've got a secondary definition that largely applies to, if you would, nuisance. The problem is, if, let's just say, conduct for someone who's got special educational needs.
Yes.
If an individual comes along and they're not trained in effectively identifying the original, if you would, definition,
Yes.
but the problem is that they then could end up going through a court process, going through everything for the sake of the fact of them having an original, if you would, definition. In 1981, they introduced the Educational Act, right? On the back of the Educational Act, the Special Education Form had a little tick box for antisocial behaviour. If that original tick box was ticked for anyone for that period, up to the late 90s, then they would be, say for instance, if someone looked at that for the court, or if the probation looked at those documents, they would fail to identify the original 1978 definition, so they would take that latter definition to mean the 1998 definition.
I understand what you're saying.
Can you answer that question? If not,
I can.
I will respond.
All right, so where you have multiple bits of legislation that can be sitting alongside an original piece of legislation or updating or changing it, the police will work to whatever is relevant to the circumstance they're being called to. So, for example, the most recent antisocial behaviour legislation, which a lot of that updated in 2014 as well, will be that brought in things like the community trigger, which I don't know if you know about, but there are some really good pieces of antisocial behaviour legislation out there. And in fact, when I was at a meeting with the Bay Mayors earlier today at lunchtime. Bob and I were meeting with them together. We were talking about the use of antisocial behaviour legislation, how effective it can be, and actually if the police are called to a noisy neighbour, playing loud music at 1 o'clock in the morning, slamming doors, loud shouting and arguing, or things that may cause a noise pollution, a noise disturbance to other people living, say, in a block of flats, they would be going by the most recent piece of ASB legislation. Now, it sounds like you probably have some experience where the gap in between those two bits has caused you an issue. I'm very happy to work with you offline about that if you want me to. I don't think I truly probably understand the nuance in that at the moment because I'm not aware of the 78 legislation, but I could look into that for you if you've been
It's not so much legislation, it's a report.
Say again, sorry?
It's a report, and it's pretty much like the same report that you rely upon, yeah, that brings this into power for your idea of crime and slaughter.
Yes.
At the end of the day, if you've got an original definition and if you've got a latter definition, what is being done to prevent the two being confused?
Okay.
It's very simple.
Okay, fair enough. Donna, thank you very much indeed for answering it. We can continue the conversation a bit later. I just want to make sure we're bringing other people in. Thank you. Yes, what's your name, please?
My name's Wight. I come from Shelford. 3 weeks ago today, someone turned up in my close, started throwing stones at cars and our houses and eggs. And 4:30 in the afternoon, I phoned 999. My neighbour phoned 999. It went on 7 o'clock. Someone turned up and arrested the person. Today, I haven't had anyone come to see me about how it's affected us and any damage to our property. And do you think that's a reasonable answer to a 999? You know, I spoke with a PCO in Tottenham, and I mentioned it to her, and she said, well, surely someone's come to see you and taken a statement by now. I said, no, that's 3 weeks ago. Since then, the girl's been arrested. She's only a young girl, 14-year-old. She's been told under her bail conditions not to come back to our close, so she comes straight back. Been released last Saturday. Thrown more stones at our house, smashed more windows, and she's just gone been let out on bail with the same conditions this week. There's something very wrong here. One thing, the police are not turning up to 999 calls from 4:30 to 7 o'clock at night before anyone come out. And the other thing is, the bail conditions are not being seen to, you know, it's just, and apparently these teenagers have been all around Freshwater, Yarmouth, and now they're in Shelford, causing shop windows have been broken in Shelford, houses.
Before Donna comes in, sir, are these the same antisocial behaviour kids in front?
I take it they are.
Okay.
I take it they are.
Right.
But now one of them's been moved to Shelford, and she thinks, well, I've been banned from Freshwater.
Just before Donna comes in general to talk about that, just on that point, I've been dealing with Matt, who's a senior, I think, senior officer who deals with the West Wight policing, but also Eva, who's a very good police officer who's all over this. And I've also written I got in slight trouble about it because I wrote to the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, and to our Isle of Wight magistrates, and I said, can you please support the police more? So when the police come to you with sort of behaviour order stuff, can you please support them rather than endlessly giving antisocial kids second and third chances? So they have recently scored some victories, and so there are beginning to be more and more conditions on these young people's, on the offending kids' behaviours.
That doesn't seem to have any effect on
If you want, I will take your number afterwards, and I will chase up your case individually with the police. But I'm not going to hand over to Donna just to talk in general.
Do you think that from 4:30 in the evening to 7 o'clock on a 999 call, we were told to stay in our house, not to go out because we are under threat, that is a reasonable time for enough? We phoned 3 times, myself and my neighbour and my wife, over a period of time. Nobody's come to see us to take a statement or anything as yet, and that was 3 weeks ago.
Right, so first of all, I'm sorry that you had to wait for 3 or 4 hours for someone to get to you. When the calls come into the control room, they're graded. There's a grade 1 is absolute emergency, police must deploy right now, and there's a target of getting there within 4 minutes. A grade 2 means that an incident has happened, but perhaps the individual's left the scene. So let's say a fight in a pub, someone's been punched, the assailant has left the vicinity, and the victim is still there, whatever. So that would be graded as a grade 2. That means get to as quickly as you can. Grade 3, malicious communication. Someone's being unkind to me online, someone's been harassing me online. That would be perhaps past the neighbourhood team to get to you within the next 48 to 72 hours.
This girl was outside our house, throwing stones, throwing bottles, throwing glass at windows, smashing windows, throwing stones at the car, and she was saying for 2.5 hours, "Where's the police? We thought we found the police," and laughing at us.
She was going.
And where was the police?
Well, I'm sorry that they didn't get there for that period of time. I can only think that there were grade 1 jobs on the island, which meant that they had to get there because of fear of injury to people directly. I appreciate your home was being damaged under criminal damage, and you were under attack effectively in your own home, which is
We were under
frightening,
attack. The whole close was under attack.
which is frightening and awful. The situation that happened in Freshwater, if it is the same group of
I
youths,
believe it is.
through Bob and through some of the councillors, I was contacted about that. So what I did is I paid for some mediation and some youth crime diversion away in the Freshwater area to divert the young people away and to try and engage them in some of the brilliant into some of the really good charities that we commission. Often with young people, it will be complex drugs and not so much alcohol. It's normally drugs with young people and mental health issues. So then what the police are having to do, through my office as well, is engage with the council to say, this person needs a serious care package. This person has got complex mental health issues, which is why they are lashing out and acting the way that they are. I'm not trying to mitigate the behaviour, just explaining that we can keep arresting. The point about bail and the fact that she, by the sounds of it, she's been to court multiple times, so police are turning up, arresting, she's being charged, because you have to have a charge to get to court, and then she's been given bail conditions, as Bob has quite rightly said, is actually down to the magistrates and not down to the police. And trust me, the police will be as frustrated when they hear that young people or anyone are given bail conditions when they're really hoping there's going to be a remand or some very serious sanctions if they are bailed. It really is as frustrating, because when they breach those bail conditions, it's the police that have to go back and arrest again.
Looking at what I see, the police seem to be loose end of what do we do? What do we do here?
They don't know what to do. I'm really happy to work with you and with Bob's office to perhaps look at doing some
I
more
would very
outreach
much
in your
like
area.
that, because, you know, all we know, our house, when we get home, will probably be under
You shouldn't have to live
Can
like that.
I
It's
say
not
something?
acceptable.
Are there any tips that when, because, okay, I had an antisocial neighbour 20 years ago now, an antisocial, I mean, this isn't an antisocial neighbour, it's just somebody living in your street.
Never, she just turned up in the close and she didn't care who it was.
To get a police car to be more likely to attend you is slightly how you describe it. If you were to ring up and say there's no threat to life or limb and she hasn't done that much damage to her car, the police may not turn up. But if you say we are scared for our lives and we're scared that she's going to self-injure,
And they said stay indoors, whatever you do, don't go out. So
being imprisoned.
I'm really happy to take that away with you and find and
I'd
also
like
get
you
you
to
some
take this
feedback.
case up and look into it, please.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's been dealt
In
with
terms of your
correctly.
statement not being taken, if the individual pleads guilty and says, yeah, I did it, they should still be feeding back to you. That's the thing I said at the very beginning. As a victim of crime, you should be given an update on that. And it's really disappointing that you haven't, and I will look into that for you. Victims' impact statements are key for sentencing, but also if it has to go to trial because the individual is not going to plead guilty. But if there is clear evidence, and with mental health issues, very often people say, yeah, I did it, it was me, because it's a cry for help. I'm not mitigating it again, I'm really not. But I'm really happy to look into that for you, and I'm so sorry it happened. It's not good enough, and I can see that clearly it's caused you and your neighbours a lot of distress, which is
It
awful.
has. You know, we're frightened to park our car, we're frightened to even go out and leave the house because we don't know if it's going to be damaged when
We can do some more youth diversion
I'm
stuff
grateful
as
that you
well.
raised the issue, and if I can take the details afterwards, we'll get on to it. And apologies and thank you.
We need to get authorised.
Right,
I'll
you,
give him my
Yeah, and Maureen who works with me at the back
Can we
and
get
John, so they
ladies and gents details on the lever?
Sorry to tell
Alex
you.
Robbich, Living Counts.
Hello.
Thank you, Dr. Seeley, for arranging this for the public meeting. There have been 3 failed Hampshire police investigations into the hundreds of patients, patient deaths that took place in Gospel War Memorial Hospital. Constabulary took over and recently discovered there were 750 deaths of concern. My question is there now going to be an investigation into Hampshire Police's failed investigations? Why 3 failed investigations? Who are they, are they competent? Who are they protecting? Are they institutionally corrupt? What's going on?
So it is a live murder investigation, so I am not privy to speak about the specifics of what Kent are doing, but I will answer your question about the previous Hampshire Police investigations. As you know, these tragedies of what happened at Gospel Memorial spanned a number of years, dating from the late 70s right up until 2000. As you quite rightly say, there are a high number of incidents that have been identified as potentially unexplained deaths of high levels of opioid. And so that murder investigation, for want of a better word, is currently being undertaken. As Police and Crime Commissioner, along with the Chief Constable, just the two of us are given regular updates from the SIO, the Senior Investigating Officer from Kent Police. I also am paying for, as in on behalf of all of you, through the budgets that I have, am paying for a large chunk of that. At the moment we get a Home Office grant for around £5 million a year. Now in terms of the 3 previous failed Hampshire Police investigations, there has already been a review done of that. Actions were taken and sanctions were taken as well. I want you to be assured of that. Clearly predate me and the Chief Constable by a number of years, but yes, there were failings and they are simply not good enough. And I can assure you, things that happened then absolutely do not happen now.
Yeah, I think I've just come back to what you said right at the very beginning of the meeting about effective police.
Yeah.
That relies on public trust.
It does, absolutely.
I think it's disgraceful. We have 3 attempts to investigate that failed. So that's worrying.
It is very worrying, but I can tell you that things have changed and improved enormously since that all started 20 plus years ago. There were, as you say, there were a number of failings, and there honestly has been very in-depth reviews gone on and outcomes, and there were outcomes and sanctions.
In terms of outcomes and sanctions, if people leave the force?
Yes.
Are you suggesting there was some corruption or collusion? Is that
Well, I don't know. I mean, it just smells to me. I mean, Bob, I wrote to you several years ago about this, and you very kindly sort of forwarded my concerns to the Minister of Health at the time.
Yeah.
It's staggering that so many the people, well, I think the phrase was that
Lost their lives.
they were made comfortable. Basically, they were murdered and they were killed.
Is it? Okay. Thank you. So,
I get a bit
Can I ask your
annoyed.
name?
Oh,
No, can I ask your name?
Nick.
Yeah. Thanks.
I get a bit annoyed with private e-scooters going around
You're not
where
the
we
only
live.
E-scooters.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we making them
I know it's
illegal?
very hard to police
The
them.
bane of policing police officers' lives and PCSOs. So, unfortunately, the DFT, the government, in their wisdom, have not caught up with the way that e-scooters have been monitored and regulated across Europe. As you know, in places like Portsmouth, you've got areas where there are properly licensed hire schemes for e-scooters, and they're just about to bring in how you can hire in Portsmouth. It's almost like a moped, but you can hire it from the age of 14 because the engine is 50cc and because the maximum speed will be just under 30 miles an hour. So it could be equivalent speed to an electric bike, they say. But have a little bar, a plastic thing on the back that you have on a moped, and it looks like a moped. So you can imagine 14-year-olds in Portsmouth are going to have a field day with these. Because you can go to Halfords and buy an electric scooter for 300 or 400 quid, parents don't realise that when they go and buy them for their kids, they're actually inadvertently breaking the law if they don't have insurance, have a helmet, and have an MOT. And of course, it's actually very difficult to get insurance for a 12-year-old on an electric scooter, because who's going to insure that risk when they don't know how to drive and everything else? So the DFT have been doing a review because, of course, police forces have been turning around and saying, hang on a minute, you can buy them in Halfords for, you know, an affordable price that families can afford for Christmas presents, birthday presents, but yet we're the ones getting the flack when they're not being driven in accordance with the law. But how do we police that across communities in the country when there are so many of them? And also, we don't want to be criminalising 12-year-olds. The government needs to do more to make a greater marketing campaign around what is appropriate and what's not with the use of scooters, like they did with Plunk Click Every Trip for wearing a seatbelt back in the 80s, etc. So the DfT have carried out a big consultation. They are about to change the regulation, and I guess it's law effectively, the law around the use of e-scooters, particularly around young people using them. It can't come quick enough from our perspective. They are an absolute pain in the bum. They're also very quiet, so you can be on a pavement walking along and suddenly one's right behind you. We've actually had, I think, just under 10 deaths in the county that have arisen from the use of electric scooters. People getting knocked, riding pillion, hitting their heads on curbs. It's been really, really awful, actually. They are a pain, and I don't have a solution to that one, other than the government need to get with the programme.
The ones I see up where I live in Pan is usually old ladies in their 50s.
Oh, really?
Driving them on the pavement or up the road. I told them off.
Oh, do you mean mobility scooters?
No, electric scooters.
Oh, right, okay.
Then I think you're not allowed that on the road. Private ones, you know. And they tell you to go away very nicely. Begin with F, but... And there was loads of people driving them on the pavements and up there.
No, I have to say, I think they're incredibly antisocial. We shouldn't encourage their use. But you've got to make a very good point. It could be something.
I agree with you.
Thank you so much.
Genuinely, probably one for Bob to take on
We'll be in
your
touch
behalf.
on Monday. Thank you.
So sorry
Thank you
about
both.
that. Thank you.
Arranging this, but I want your...
Yes, I've scribbled on that one.
Have this one, have this one. There you go.
It's been very interesting.
This one I've got. I've scribbled in more now. Thank you.
Come and talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Michael, do you have a question?
Are you happy to begin?
Yeah. Very well.
I mean, Donna, as you know, thank you for all the money down at the castle, and we appreciate you've got a long time ahead. But at the present time, you know, I've had family all in Arsenal. And that was the 19th you came down. I went to court on the 23rd, basically pleaded guilty. The only reason I went to court was because it ended up that he had instant drink driving, and basically there were 6 emergency offences caused with serious injury to the police. That then caused the arson charge. He was pleaded guilty and went to court for today, we were told, for sentencing. We haven't heard anything. I've been linking, I did 29 years social housing, I've been linking with the housing and anti-social department. I've had to get solicitors personally to try to get injunctions because constantly they're getting harassed. I got a report back from the police and it says, you know, the shortages, understandably, I know you're trying to improve that, but it took 3 weeks for them to caution. My daughter-in-law last week actually did what she should have done and did a gesture, and within a day they come and told her off. And yet the arson, it took 3 weeks. You know, we need to see, hopefully you're channeling that, but the victim needs to be protected more than the perpetrator.
Good question. Can I just say, actually, there is a feeling, because I pick it up from people I speak to, that if you are a career criminal, you just game the system, and you know, you just take the system finds it very difficult to deal with you. I mean, if you're an honest and law-abiding citizen that crosses the line, you know, the law jumps all over you because you're an easy target. But if you're someone who's got 52 convictions and you make life hell for basically every human being around you, we don't seem to really know how to deal with those people in our society anymore.
Yeah, I mean, my family has come and watched my house because we're trying to make young children safe in our place rather than them. While he is across the road every day is trying to buy them out, suss them out, and then go across the road and get more drink. You know, there needs to be more responsibility in the police to understand the difference between arson and a gesture and the distance when it comes out. You know. And I know you're working hard on that, and we can see what you're doing within the world. The ground roots is where it needs to be learned and go back to basics.
You know, the police are damned if they do, and they're damned if they don't. You know, obviously some kind of incident was reported by him around some kind of hate crime or gesticulation or whatever. They turn up and probably say to your daughter, just don't do it again. But they doubt the incident. Sounds like she didn't get charged. police are criticised for turning up quickly to that one. Actually, you told me that the chap committed the arson and was in court within 3 days, so presumably there'd been an arrest, an investigation and a charge within that. And actually I'm going to have their backs a little bit here, because it's not...
30 days, not...
Sorry, I thought you said within 3 days, beg your pardon, within 3 weeks. Okay, apologies. I now understand and can quantify what you're saying about the next day with gesticulation. I get it. Apologies. Yeah, I mean, look, it is difficult. The police have worked, honestly, please trust me, they work so hard with the resources they've got. It's not the police's fault that through austerity over the last 10, 12 years, the officer numbers were cut to the level they were. If you ask any police officer, and there are 2 at the back of the room, around, why did you join the police? Actually, it's to catch bad people, get them locked up and get them off the streets. They want to catch bad people as much as we want them to catch bad people. The bureaucracy they have to go through, the form filling, how long it takes to get people to court, when the courts then don't make sensible decisions, they get as frustrated with that as we do. I can honestly tell you they do. And that's why that role I spoke about at the beginning, about the criminal justice system and the criminal justice board that I chair. So for example, the bail conditions with a young girl, when I've looked into that and got those details through Bob and through Laurie, I will take that up with the bench chair and the magistrates on the Isle of Wight to say what happened. That's not, without knowing the ins and outs. And I was a magistrate for 16 years, so I will be able to understand the process that they were going through when they were looking at her antecedents. With children, sometimes they do need to have multiple convictions before you can remand them, obviously. I'm sorry about what happened with you. If there's anything that I can do to help support your daughter, I do pay for victim services, as you know, as I said at the beginning, to support her, particularly around that situation. It sounds like with the chap over the road, there is, obviously this is not settled yet. There are certain things.
I've got the lady's name, so we understand he's been before. But the frustrating part is we had a ring doorbell.
Yeah.
All the information was calling was sent to the police, and it wasn't used quick enough.
Right, but he has been convicted.
No, well we had, again...
It was today the trial, sorry, if you're waiting.
As a victim, they have not been informed, and when they do...
But it was today the trial.
Yeah,
Well, hopefully they will get. I mean, let's give the police a chance. It was only today. So, I'm going to have their backs a bit here. Let's give them a chance to feedback on the outcome. But it sounds like there is an ongoing issue there if he lives in their proximity. At the very least, it may have grounds for a restraining order, so he can't approach their property within, let's say, 5 metres if he lives over the road. I don't know. But I'm really happy to talk to you offline about that and see how I can support you and your daughter.
Thank you, Mike. I have a few questions. So,
I'm David, I'm a former police officer a long time ago and former head teacher. I'm aware of a group of people who regularly meet together and regularly break the law. Consciously, together with a group of other people, we've got together, got video surveillance, we've reported a dozen crimes to the police, one of which has been actions to be taken, apparently, and that was a death threat and assault on me.
where was this been? About 10 years ago?
Also,
Okay.
roughly in that area. I was driven into by a vehicle. I was threatened with, I will kill you. And that has been processed. There's a community resolution order being put on that one. When I spoke to 101, the follow-up conversations I had with police in Southampton, the sergeant advised me there that it was a clear section 4 public order and careless driving. I thought reckless because he drove into me deliberately, but okay, how's that? When it came to the Isle of Wight, it was common assault. That is a common assault. Shouting at somebody is a common assault. And it was all downplayed to virtually nothing. This guy who threatened to kill me is a black belt karate instructor. He has admitted to the police he has anger issues. I think he's possibly capable of doing what he threatened, yeah? But it's not just an isolated incident. Oh, by the way, part of the community resolution order was used to write a letter of apology to me. That was in October, and now we are in, tomorrow.
So this is dealt with as an out-of-court disposal, didn't even get to court. Is that where the community resolution came from? Okay.
which they see only to do, because he was caught on video, because we had all the equipment to record it. Now, this isn't an isolated incident. There are other incidents involving vehicles with no NOC or insurance being used inappropriately.
By him?
By this group of people could possibly come under the definition, arguably, organised crime group, led by a local head teacher and a local prominent local businessman. And they just think they can get away with it. There's a name of one of the PCs is the same surname as some members of this group. And I wonder why have all of these offences somehow mysteriously disappeared or not been acted on?
I'm really happy to look into that for you. It's obviously very specific. I would need to get the details of reporting dates, and if you can give me as much information as you can.
I've got some of them because I did send an email to you
Right.
6 months ago when I had absolutely no action whatsoever.
Right, okay. And then what happened when you contacted me?
There was no apparent change.
So my office responded and said,
I got an email back saying thank you for your blah, but nothing more than...
well, that's not how my office works. So when people come to me with issues, I then, if it looks to me like there is an untoward behaviour and the police haven't done what they need to do, I will get the file pulled. I have a DCI that works just with me in my office, who will then review it, get the file out, go through everything. If we think anything's been missed, we go back to the officer in the case and say, you need to review this, we're not happy. So I'm really happy to look into the specifics for you, particularly if you have contacted me already. I'm sorry you haven't had the service that you want, but that is the normal practice of how I do things in my office.
David, do you want to just ping me the brief details and I will, and copy me in as well if you'd like to do that?
Yeah.
And then,
Something else I was going to say just then because of what you just mentioned. I lost it.
do you want to email me? It's very easy to find out details and I'll pass,
And me,
I'll pass everything on to Donna. I mean, we have 30 more police officers, so we have more leeway to look, or more capability to look at sort of quality of life crimes. And it sounds like that is...
If you think there's an allegation of potential corruption because you think there is a name, associated with the police,
I don't know.
that would be dealt with separately and I can get that sorted out for you.
I don't know, but what I do know is offence after offence after offence are presented with clear evidence, like video evidence of a vehicle colliding with me. That was another incident, a different vehicle drove into me deliberately, and then another one came up and was within 6
I think with specific things like that, I need to have the opportunity to look into it and come back to you properly so that I can make sure that I'm really absolutely keen to support you as best I can. And I will get the case files pulled and I'll have a look at them for you.
And in addition to that, there's associate, because this is a wildlife crime issue as well, because it involves hunting with dogs. And now the white fox hunters. And it also involves illegal traps that have been set in places that have been reported to the police, and a conversation has been had. So it's just a conversation rather than anything else at all. Everything seems to be diminished. Now, I had reason to contact the commander of the Isle of Wight a couple of years ago, and then it became somebody else, and then it became somebody. It was really hard to find out who it was. It's gone from being, I think, a superintendent to an inspector.
No, not at all. Chief Superintendent.
You had Sarah Jackson, then you had Jim Paper, and now you've got Bob Mitchell. Because Jim retired, actually came to work for me, he's now director of my line of production unit. He's been with you for about 4 or 5 months as your district commander for the Isle of Wight, but he is a superintendent in rank.
Okay. Why don't you contact me and I'll chase it up? I think that's probably the best thing to do. Thank you very much. So,
yeah, my name's Chris. Specific question relating to wildlife crime. When is the island going to have a full-time wildlife officer with a number that we can call directly if we have an issue with wildlife crime taking place on the island?
and when it comes to wildlife crime, can I just ask, are you talking about poaching or is this about hunting?
In general, wildlife crime is right from the island. I know specifically that landing is occurring, coursing is occurring, that hunting is occurring, and it's going on throughout the year. And the problem is that badger sets are being dug out. I've personally been to the scene of the badger dig out with the previous wildlife officer, who that wasn't his full-time post. He was a traffic officer that did that on the side. Unfortunately, he then got taken away from that as well. So I've visited badger set dig outs. I've witnessed wildlife crime all over the island. We have nobody we can go to with these crimes, and they are crimes.
Yeah.
It is a
Right,
crime.
that's
Now,
quite an easy one for me to
the
be able
problem is,
to
we bring
respond
one
to.
on where, like this lady said over here, I've been on the phone for over an hour to 101. By the time they then get back to the Isle of Wight, 2 days have gone by. The response needs to be within minutes, not within 48 hours, because the wildlife crime is taking place there and then, not 2 days later.
So there are dedicated police officers on the Isle of Wight who absolutely understand the complexity of rural crime, because not all police officers understand what poaching is or what hare forcing is and some of the things that you're referring to. There is a brand new rural crime strategy that Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Constabulary launched 2 weeks ago. I've been really pleased to get you connected to the Isle of Wight rural crime lead police officer, so that you can have contact with them where you've got issues, where you've got concerns, if you've got to feed in intelligence. We can arrange for that to happen for you. We would very much welcome that intelligence, because if we know something's likely to happen in a certain area, it's much easier to then catch someone in the act and get the evidence there and then. So we can make sure that we can do that for you, so you can feed in lines of intelligence. Crimes do need to be reported through 999 and 101. I'm sorry about that, but by you having a relationship and getting to know the rural lead on the Isle of Wight, that will clearly make it much easier for you to understand what they're doing and to give them information, because they might be thinking about specialist policing, rural policing operations they want to run. They want to bid in for some additional resource from me and from the Chief Constable to run in a particular area if there are issues. By getting intelligence from people like yourselves, who are clearly living in the rural communities, who understand what's going on, that's how we can make sure the policing response is appropriate and where it needs to be. So I can get you linked up and get you somebody that you can get to know and start to build a relationship with, so you can feed information in.
I did go to a meeting on Tuesday with TCSA Justin Keith, who spoke on that very point about rural and wildlife crime. Now, if he is the lead person, then I already had an open channel conversation with him, but again, he's of the opinion that there isn't anything on the island directly dealing with wildlife crime. It's been dealt with on the mainland.
Just because a superintendent sits on the mainland, they cover the island as well. So unfortunately, the PCSO is probably giving you some slightly skewed information there. Let me get you the right person and come back to you. So if you go through Bob's office again, I can make sure that I get that person to you, if that's okay.
Thank you very much, Jenny, for your questions. Mike, I'm just slightly aware of the time. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mine isn't a social problem, but before we start, can I ask you to convey my heartfelt appreciation to Chief Constable? As far as I know, it's the first Chief Constable to realise and admit that police officers have no need to have a university degree. It may look real on paper, and when is somebody in authority going to drop the notion that because policemen haven't been to university, must be thick cretins? Far from it. I've got pretty high rank in Met, and I'm so proud of people I met there, just from 12 weeks training. They soon acquire a confidence of psychology, common sense, and at times immense bravery. Secondly, may I...
Here, well done.
Yeah, and now, if I heard you right, your promotion on national level, congratulations there too.
Thank you.
Anyway, the main thing is that pinnacle and social behaviour carrying of knives, so this will affect you both of you. I'm the West Wight where nobody's, well, there's about knocking the doors up, but it's breaking up now, and we're suffering approximately one vicious murder, stabbing, a day. And I've got the impression that think, oh well, boys will be boys, or not much we do about it. It's a terrible thing. Every time somebody's stabbed and killed. And I'm wondering actually, it's not punishment so much, there's nowhere to put them. Prisons are full, nobody will do anything that looks like real, such serious correction. And what I want to know is, why is it happening now, and not about 10, 20, 30 years ago? And that's a very, so before we solve the problem, on a national basis or a local one, it means that we've got to find out really why it's happening. And I would like a long survey of going into that, of why is it happening now? Now, a single mum with 2 kids with knives, every sort of sympathy for them. And a man that is a tough man and has got his children to knives and violence, he's got to come in and be made responsible for it. That's a long story, I know. But what I really would like in this thing is, if we had a group of people looking into it, seriously looking into it, so what's happened, can I ask that we don't have a collection of intellectual pieces to punishment or to tell them any kind of dirty word and infringement on civil liberties? Because every time we try and be reasonable with unreasonable men, they see the weakness. So the country really has got to get a serious discipline. You know, name and shame is one. Can't do that. Offend the poor devils, you know. And they're a perfect example of mankind masking rather than mending. You know. And there's a very brief two-line story. Winston Churchill is supposed to have said it. Appeasers are those who run past a man unconscious, bleed profusely for robbery to chase the perpetrator because he needs help. Now that just about sums up what we're doing now. We don't defend the villains, we don't, and I don't know that we're short of money, terribly short of money, because leaving Europe, COVID and Ukraine, all things we need to do. So I know it's a really difficult thing now, but that's mainly problem, I suppose. Can we get a real in-depth, not just a circling or royal commission that takes months, a real in-depth look at what has changed? When we find that out, perhaps we can then find out why, we get old people now beaten to a pulp for money they probably haven't got. So,
yes.
and that, I think, is really desperate.
Fantastic. Thank you. Donna.
So, on the first one, I take a little bit of credit for the ending of the police degree. So one of the caveats the Chief Constable about starting was, I want to get rid of that stupid bit of police degree because I hate it. And I'm talking about it from before I even got elected. Once I got elected, I think it is ridiculous. Having said that, we haven't ended it, we've ended it being mandatory. So from the 31st of March this year, previous Home Secretary Priti Patel had said back 18 months ago that it was going to be mandatory that from the 31st of March 2023, every new recruit coming into policing anywhere in England and Wales must have a police degree. The previous Chief Constable here was a big fan of it. She thinks that upskilling policing and having degrees was absolutely key. When I got elected, and so she started that in 2020, police entry qualification, which is the PEQF, which is what it was. When I got elected in May 21, I said to her, don't like it. I think we should, if new officers want to do it, fine, but we shouldn't make it mandatory. Some Chief Constables, Thames Valley, who is our buddied police force, every police force is buddied with another force. Chief Constable there, previous Chief Constable John Carroll said, I'm not doing it, I think it's ridiculous. And actually, there were 4 or 5 Chief Constables across the country who were being a bit bloody-minded towards the Home Office and the previous Home Secretary and saying, we're not going to do it. College of Policing, who owned the governance around it, were really pushing it to all police forces. So when I became the PCC, I said to previous chief, don't like it. She said, well, I do. And they are her staff, not mine. And then when the new chief started, I said, what do you think of it? Well, during the interview process, what do you think of PEQF? He said, it's a load of rubbish. I said, great, let's get rid of it then. And he said, yeah, okay, good. So we have. And the advert has gone out this week
How many
for...
policing hours does that say? It's ridiculous.
It's going to save approximately 100,000 policing hours a year from the 600 that we have recruited. So it takes police officers 3 years to get fully qualified if you do the degree route. What we've done now, the advert has gone out this week for the brand new entry for people that will start in July on the non-police degree entry route. So back to the 15 weeks core training that you would have had before. But if a police officer wants to join and wants to do the degree, they can, but it's now not mandatory. Now, Suella Braverman, new Home Sec, relatively new Home Sec, as she's a Hampshire MP as well, I'm in a very fortunate position as a police commissioner to be able to lobby her direct, and we are friends, so I spoke to her and said, this is bonkers, and she said, I agree with you. So actually she announced it at the National Policing Conference. We have a big policing conference once a year, every PCC, every Chief Constable in the country there, in November last year, in the conference centre in London, and she said, I'm ending the mandatory police degree. If you want to do it, but you shouldn't have to. So that's number one. Number 2, knives. Absolute blight. We have an endemic in this country around knife carrying. So, you talked about the survey. I have just launched a police crime survey, which through Bob's office I'll get sent to you, so please fill it in. It is also shared on my social media pages. Laurie at the back of the room runs the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner Facebook page, Twitter account and everything, so we've shared all of that. I've also launched a funding round. All all about tackling knife crime this week. Did it go out Monday, Tuesday, press release and everything? So again, if you look on my social media, look on the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, you'll see it on there. So that's why I've been and met with Network Right today. I've been and met with Julian Wadsworth, works for.
He does it.
What's the one in Key Arts? Charity. Anyway, so people that I commission on the island, I've been and met with them today to say my new knife violence, serious violence funding round is anything between £5,000 and £25,000. I can pay for youth diversion, I can pay for specific targeting response around knives. Young people, predominantly young men, are carrying knives, as you said in what we were saying at the beginning, in they're plentiful now compared to what they were a decade ago. What's really sad is that when young people are stopped and searched or are found with a knife, and you ask them why they carry it, the vast majority, over 85% of them, it's genuinely only for protection, because they know that other men, young men their age, are carrying them and they're fearful of going out in public spaces. And then you've got the other ones who are going out with criminal intent. They're going to rob people, they're going to steal earpods and coats, expensive coats and drugs and phones and whatever it might be from other young people. And it is predominantly male on male. So the most likely category of people in our communities to be robbed are young men between the ages of 14 and 25 by other young men aged between 14 and 25. Now, we are one of 13 police forces in the country that has a violent reduction unit, which is specific money given to the 13 police forces by the Home Office, and it comes to the Police and Crime Commissioner. So the violent reduction unit operates through my office. So Jim Pegler, who was the previous superintendent here on the Isle of Wight, who was your chief police officer here, he now retired from the police at his 30-year service last October. He now works for me. He's the director of my violent reduction unit. And that is very much about tackling serious violence with young people between 14 and 24 years of age. They're very, very specific hotspot policing areas that have to be policed. It's about driving up police visibility. It has to be recorded. We carry out surveys to make sure that those things are happening. The stats will have to get reported back to the Home Office. I've got now a dedicated team of high harm police officers that are just working to tackle the knife crime. Some newer police officers, 1/3 of our police officers in the force, and for all police forces, have now got less than 5 years service because of the massive national uplift programme. And there has been some reticences around some of them around stop and searching people, because if you don't have grounds to do it, a complaint can be put in against you. That means you then go through the police standards department, blah, 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 blah. So I've said to the chief, I want you to really push stop and search out to officers, particularly newer officers, to give them the confidence to do that, so that even if a complaint is made about them, as long as they're working on intelligence, that we know in Newport that there are a gang of young lads who are carrying knives, who are white, they are dark haired, they are aging between 16, 17, 18. If you stop a young white lad in Newport who's got brown hair, who's got nothing on him, and he puts a complaint in about you, actually you were working on intelligence from the briefing you got before your shift started. So actually it's actionable. You can say, this is why we're doing it. And actually giving officers, particularly younger in-service officers, the confidence around using stop and search powers, which are incredibly powerful, is absolutely key. And just, not last week, the weekend before, the Home Secretary put something out through national media at the weekend talking about an increased use of stop and search. And some people in the policing world didn't like it. They thought it was a Home Secretary trying to direct police officers what to do, which politicians can't and shouldn't do. But it wasn't that. She was trying to say to chief constables, it's a really effective power. We know that too many young people are using knives to rob each other, injure each other, and in the worst cases, fatally injure each other. So the way to get knives off our streets and to make our communities safer is by increasing use of stop and search, so that we take more people. And if people think they're going to get stopped and searched, they're less likely to carry one. But it also is the responsibility of parents, and through education and through schools, because actually parents have a responsibility to play here in ensuring that if their kids are going out and you think they might be hanging around with the wrong kind of group of people, and they could be just about to start something or smoking marijuana, coming in, smelling of it, the chances are they may be carrying a weapon if they're involved in those kind of circles of friends. So parents also need to start doing more about this as well. It's not all down to the police.
Thank you very much. Can I just, do you mind, because Donna's got to go in about 5-10 minutes to the ferry, I'm so sorry. And I just want to get two last questions in. Can we just ask them both? John, do you want to just... John, just tell me your question.
My name is John Weber. I'm a parish officer.
Hello.
The smallest parish on the island, and we have just over 400 residents.
Are you one of them then?
Right.
Saying it's the loveliest parish.
Last night we had an IWAT meeting, the IWAT Association of the Local Council meeting, and security was mentioned, and Martin's Law was mentioned, which is, I believe, is in the process of going through, I believe.
Martin's Law?
It would happen because of the Manchester bombing.
Right.
Petition went up, and this, I believe, is about to come in.
Oh, are you talking about the closing of church halls?
It requires any venue which has more than 100 people, such as this place.
You have two exits.
The church, for instance, or your village hall. Now, as a parish council, I'm particularly worried with the costs of the items. We have very limited budgets and the precepts are pretty tiny. How are we going to pay for this? And is the police going to be, are the police going to be involved in this?
Yeah.
The other issue being an island, obviously, a very vulnerable spot is our ferries, where there's going to be well over 100 people gathered on the ferry.
Yeah.
How are we going to implement this law?
When things like that come in, it often means from this day forward, if you're building a new venue, you have to comply with 2 exits in a public space that has a capacity of over 100. So it can't be done retrospectively unless, for example, we fire legislation with cladding on, that actually, for public safety reasons, that was done retrospectively. But actually, in things like that, it would be down to the local planning authorities, so the Isle of Wight Unitary Council, to make sure that when planning applications are coming forward for community centres, doctor surgeries, public buildings, hospitals, those sorts of things, there would be 2 exits if that does become law. But it would not be a retrospective request that everyone has to then build another exit in this room, for example, because that just there's not the money to do that. So
Drop me a line and I'll double check, because I suspect it's not
It's terrorism, isn't it?
Yeah.
of course.
We don't want terrorism in
Like we have
Chiltern.
member of Parliament, had his surgery was just killed.
Yeah. But do you know, just talking about terrorism, the first person in, I think, 50 years to be charged with an act of attempted treason in this country came from the Isle of Wight, under the acts of terrorism. Somebody who tried, you probably remember it, who tried to break into Windsor Castle on Christmas Day, not just gone the Christmas before, so 18 months ago.
No, I think you're talking about the gentleman on the Isle of Wight, the person on the Isle of Wight. I thought he was going to cut the Isle of Wight first.
Different.
Okay.
There was somebody from the Isle of Wight that tried to break into, sorry, no, beg your pardon, he was from Southampton, with a crossbow. I'm talking, it's all different. It's all different public domain. I'm not saying anything I shouldn't. Sorry. There was a land charged terrorism act as well from, you're absolutely right, from very recently in the last few months. And again, we can talk about that because it's been in the press. Sorry, beg your pardon, there was a chap from Southampton, Christmas Day, tried to break into Windsor Castle, but I won't tell you anymore because he wasn't from the Isle of Wight, so you probably don't care.
I'm glad you've established that. Final question.
Sorry.
It's just sort of a standby. I did 30 years as a police officer, and I can tell you now that stop and search is very bad. But as the gentleman said, the exam, the degree is crap.
Yeah.
Excuse my French.
Yeah. We're not doing it.
That's me. But the important thing is that you do your basic training, which is maybe 15 weeks
now, yeah.
That's you're learning your basic laws, the laws on which everything else is based.
Yeah.
Then I did a 2-year probation where I was learning from my colleagues how to, walk the streets, because that's what policing is all about. Feet on ground, talking to people. And that's how I learned to be a police officer and stayed for 30 years.
Well, thank you.
My big thing is for the island is that I believe strongly that the island should have its own police force. It shouldn't be linked to Hampshire, because your guys can't get to us in an emergency because there's the ferry. Yeah, they're going to come across on the blue light ferry.
I'm going to answer that for Donna does. The problem is, if we try to run things on the island ourselves, we're not big enough. We don't have the depth of experience, and the public service then falls down. So we need to have as much decision making on the island as possible, but always be partnering with the mainland outfit to make sure that we keep up to evolving national standards, whether that's in health, whether that's in education, or whether that's in policing. So
but it's for these guys to remember that there isn't a backup they've got to come across from Hill.
Yes.
The backup is actually these guys here.
Yes.
He might put a call up, sorry guy, I didn't know your name. You might
That's
put a
all.
call for help. You've got to get there, but you're somewhere else. Or you could
But
visit.
that's one of the reasons why we've had our uplift, if I understand correctly, is a little bit bigger than it should be, because it gives us greater depth. So we've got 32 new officers on the island. And okay, you can get here pretty quickly by helicopter, but you can't rely on it, as you know.
Because, but the other thing is
Yes.
that there should be local officers on each, because they're that's how
But
it
there
works. When I took a PC out from probation when I was working at Homebeat, and he says, "Do you know everybody?" Yes, that's my job. The youngsters knew me from school, because I was in schools. The old people knew me if I was going past their house, they'd knock on the windows, "Are you okay?" Yeah. All the old people's homes. I was in everywhere. He could not get his head around the fact that everybody is different, they have different issues, you have to talk to them about it, and if they want to tell you about something, they come to you about it.
Thank you very much. Well, first, thank you so much for your service. I think the final question comes from a former police officer, and that gives us a great chance to talk about one of your favourite things, which is community policing.
Yeah. And actually, what you're saying is absolutely correct. You will know the geographical policing model because it's what you would work to. That's why I've employed the chief to bring it back. That's why we've done it. It went live on the 12th of June. I've also already announced a policy that every community in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight will have a named local body again. And that will be by April next year. We're hoping to get it done by the end of the year, but my pledge is by April next year. So through the uplift, through the extra 50 police officers, it might be 2 or 3 small villages will have the phone number, email address and name of their local bobby. Police officer or PCSO. That is an absolute guarantee. I've gone out and made that pledge, done it in the press, been covered in the Isle of Wight County Press and others as well. You're absolutely right. People need to know who their local police officers are. There needs to be that community connection. That's why I'm opening more front counters. It's why I'm opening more police stations, because Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Constabulary needs to say, we're open for business, pop in, even if it's not a crime, even if it's just something you're not quite sure about, even if it's about saying, we think there's some badger sets that are being set. That's what we want to do. So I'm opening a new police station in Cowes. I've already bought the lease to the building. The refurbishments are going on now. That's on the High Street opposite a pub. I'm packing onto the marina. I've got £30 million in my budget to build a brand new blue light hub on the Isle of Wight, shared with the fire brigade. That is happening. We're looking at one final site now. We have worked with the MOJ on the land in front of HMP Albany, so part of HMP Isle of Wight, right opposite the hospital. That's actually a 5-acre piece of land, that bit there. Would have been great for a blue light hub. We think there could be another site that we prefer, so we're just working on that now. There will be a sexual assault referral centre for people who are raped and serious sexual assaults on the island. We're bringing that back in. I've worked with NHS England right to the very centre to get them to commission that, so that will be happening. I am reopening the front counter in Newport. So there's a whole load of things that are going on the island to really open the force back up. I've been down to Sandown Police Station, which stinks, by the way, it's horrible inside. You can testify that, it is absolutely awful. You walk in there and it's where all the cells are still in there, but all closed, and they just drain to chuck up, it's awful. Anyway, when I walked in I was like, oh my goodness me. So anyway, there's a whole refurbishment programme. You'll know the police station in Sandown has got that kind of like front bit. It feels like it's a front counter, it will be a front counter. I've invested in electric bikes so the police officers can be more visible and not always in cars. You're very hilly here, so it's hard work for them to be out on normal mountain bikes. So you were the first in the force area to get electric mountain bikes that can get around, and the local police are telling me they love it. So I am going to make sure that this force is back open for business, that you guys can get through on the phone easy, that people give you feedback. And I'm sorry that there have been incidents where you've not had feedback or, turn up for gesticulation for hours. That's just typical. I'm so sorry about that as well. But we are going to get back to being an older style police force like we used to have, so that people feel connected to their police force.
It's hard because you don't want to say back in my day we did.
Yeah, but that's
I get it.
It worked. My husband was a beat officer.
Oh, there you go.
Yes. I met him when my house was burgled.
Like everybody else. And I didn't have body armour, but I fought for the guys to get body armour because
Fed reps.
Because, yeah, that was me,
But do you know we were the first force in the country to have body arms? That's probably down to you then. First force in the country to use body worn video, and the first force in the country. Have either of you got the new staff vests on? Could you come forward and model it for us?
Yeah.
Actually, do you know what? They're not that popular. A lot of people don't like them, but this is the new style staff vest. So if you see the lines across the front like that, and we were the first force in the country to get them about 4 months ago.
Do you need training on Sunday?
So again?
Do you need training
was a major miracle. Yes, one kind of building with a skirt.
Next to the fire station.
So again?
Next to the fire station.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's training.
It's checked. Thank you.
Good questions because I at the end. But until March, I'm your local body. Donna, thank you so much. Thank you also for the Trauma Rape Centre. We haven't talked about it for a bit, but I raised it with you a few months ago. You're very good at remembering stuff and pushing it through, and I'm very grateful. And we need that. We need the new Blue Light Centre, etc. Thank you so much indeed. I know you've got to get back quite soon, so we don't want to delay you anymore. But thank you so much indeed for being here. Thank you.